Welcome to the Music is My Life podcast from Berklee Online. I'm your host, Pat Healy, and take note of Cindy Blackman Santana. Of course, you probably have taken note of her already. How could you not? That's her banging on the drums behind Lenny Kravitz in the iconic Are You Gonna Go My Way video. But Cindy's story didn't start there, and it doesn't end there either. She played with Lenny for 17 years, and in between has consistently changed her beat from jazz to rock throughout the years, collaborating with everyone from John McLaughlin to Kirk Hammett of Metallica, and, of course, her husband, Carlos Santana. They met in 2010, and he soon invited her to join his band. Soon after that, they began a romantic relationship, and soon after that, he proposed to her on stage. Spoiler alert, she said yes. Cindy has released 12 albums as a band leader and has played on countless other albums. I say countless because I ask her how many and she doesn't even know because she's played on so many. But her story begins at a pool party at the age of 7. Let's let her tell you all about it.
My mom's boss that she was working for, Chuck Colbert was his name. Rest in peace, Chuck. He had a pool party, invited our family, and I had to go to the restroom. And so I said, well, where do I go? I have to go to the bathroom. And so they said, go inside and go downstairs and go through the rec room or whatever. And so I went down there and I saw these drums and I'm like, whoa, what the heck? I love that, so it just was like an immediate connection between what I had been hearing and what I just saw.
From there, you ask for drums? Do your parents get you drums?
Oh, yeah. I had been asking for drums already. And that just really made me ask for them even more. I was 7 and I got them that Christmas. So that was like in the summertime. And then so a few months later at Christmas, then I got my first drum kit, which was a little toy Beatles kit, like a Sears and Roebuck's Beatles kit. And that thing lasted about a day. Because, between me and my cousins and my friends banging on it, it was like the drum heads were made out of little thin paper and the drums themselves were made out of little cardboard. And then I was like, oh, no, I need another kit. I got to get some more drums. So I kept begging, and I would get these little toy drum kits every year until finally when I was, we were in Ohio at that point, and our family moved to Connecticut. And that's where I finally got my first student model drum kit.
And so now you come from a musical family. Were family members jamming with you all the time?
Not jamming, but I did have some lessons. I had a lesson from my grandmother on piano. She was a classical pianist. I actually had a lesson from my uncle on acoustic guitar. And I was not interested in playing acoustic guitar or piano. I wanted to play drums. But I did have, some sort of lesson. And then I would jam around with whatever kids I could find my age. I played in the school bands. Junior high school, I played in the stage band, the concert band, the orchestra, the pit orchestra. So we did like shows and things like that. And then I also joined a marching band, a fife and drum corps, which was not in my school. It was in a neighboring town. So it was almost like a professional fife and drum corps, but I joined that corps. So there were quite a few experiences.
So what was the first time you really felt a musical connection with another player?
Probably in my first band that I joined, and I was 13 at the time. My sister had some friends who were her age. She's like 6 years older. So her friends were, quite a bit older than me. But they hired me to be in this rock funk trio. And so we connected really well. Eli was the guitar player's name. I forget the bass player's name, and I don't even remember the name of the band. But that was a nice connection there. So that was probably my first earliest connection.
So when you were in this funk band, you had said you were like 13 or so. And so you were at Connecticut at that point, I'm guessing?
Yes.
And so what was your experience, the Hartt School Music Conservatory? What was that all about?
Hartt was great because, I knew that I wanted to go on to college. And so going to Hartt was like a preparatory experience for college. I took snare drum and drum set lessons, and I took traditional harmony, which was really great for me because I needed to learn that, for going to Berklee. So Hartt was wonderful. I had a really nice drum teacher. One of the really cool experiences that I had at Hartt was when Buddy Rich came through and he played, and it was like, whoa, this man he's amazing. And I had actually seen Buddy. He was the first great drummer that I actually saw play. I had seen him when I was about 13, actually, at an amusement park. At that point, we lived in Bristol, Connecticut, and there was an amusement park a couple miles away. And my friends and I went, and we had all these tickets to go on all these rides. And I heard this music coming out of this, like a ballroom. And so I went over there, and I was a child. I didn't know. I thought that my ticket could get me in. So I said to the guy, here's my ticket. I want to come in and see this music. He said, well, you can't come in here. I said, why not? He said, because you're a minor, they're serving alcohol. I'm like, oh no. So I I snuck around to the side and I peeked in the window, and I saw this man who was like, I'm like, what? And I didn't know who he was. And I went to school the next day and I said to my band teacher, wow, I saw this really old guy with some fast hands. When I was 13. And he said, well, where? And I said, at Lake Compounds. And I said, it was like a big band. And this guy was just incredible. And he said, Cindy, that was one of the greatest drummers ever. That was Buddy Rich. I was like, Buddy Rich? Okay, so that was my first experience to him and to that ilk of greatness, which was amazing. So all of that whole kind of scene in Connecticut and in, which that was prior to going to Hartt. But that whole thing just was pretty cool for me.
Yeah. So who fostered your love of jazz? Was that at Hartt, or, you'd said you were playing in a funk band at 13. Rock and roll radio was big at that time too. So how were you pursuing your love of jazz and who was cultivating that?
A lot of it was from listening to my dad's record collection because he had some great jazz records. And my sister had like 200 records, everything from Coltrane to James Brown. She had the Beatles. She had Miles. She had everybody, So listening to their collections was really inspiring to me. And at that time, a lot happened when I was 13. This is also when I was 13, we had a friend who played with Jackie McLean. This is in Connecticut. He's a drummer. His taken name was Daoud. His given name was Doug Woods. And he said, okay, if you want to be a drummer, you got to listen to the greatest. And so he turned me on to Max Roach, and he wrote out on a paper a pattern that Max was playing on this particular song, which was 4/4 on the bass drum, 2 and 4 on the sock cymbal. He was swinging in the right hand, and he was playing triplets in the left hand, against all that. And when I was like, whoa, this is incredible, because the drummers that I had heard were all playing like a 3-limb style. So nobody was playing 4-limb style like that. And that just blew my mind. So that really pushed me into and intrigued me about jazz. And I wanted to learn more and know more. I wanted to get into that, so that really inspired me to get into it. And from there, I started listening to Elvin, and I didn't listen to them in the proper chronological order. I heard Max first, and then Elvin, and then Art Blakey, and then Philly Joe, and then Roy Haynes. I had heard Buddy Rich before, but in terms of the bebop drummers, those are the guys that I heard. Some more down the line, I heard Billy Higgins and Louis Hayes and cats like that. And then I heard my ultimate hero, Tony Williams, and that really took me into a whole nother dimension of not only love, but quest for, following that path.
Yeah. And were you at that time still also playing with different rock bands?
I was, yeah, I was. But my growing love and, my main thing was to learn how to play jazz because it was so much more intricate and there was so much more involved in the music. It just really intrigued me. It became my favorite music, which it still is today.
Yeah, yeah. Did when you were playing with, the funk bands and rock bands, were you having to exercise restraint at such a young age? It seems like such a sophisticated thing to be able to understand the difference between genres rather than I know how to do this. I'm going to use it for whatever type of music I'm playing.
Yeah, there's certain things that depending on the goal of that band, there are certain things that you don't really use. And me, I want to use it all because I love it all. So I find ways to use it all.
And you were even doing that back then too.
I was trying. I was getting into it. I didn't know how to do it quite, but I was formulating. I was learning, and I'm still learning. But at that stage, it was very early learning, So yeah, I was trying to formulate and figure out how to do that, and to put my voice and my love for jazz into the other musics. And so I kind of figured out how to do that, for me. But that's what I was trying to do because, like I said, jazz became my absolute favorite thing.
Yeah, like would you go to see rock concerts and just be kind of bored by the drummers there, or who was knocking your socks off as far as rock drummers at the time?
I wasn't bored, because I liked the music, but I knew that there was something that was more advanced and that, would take me into further and deeper dimensions. I have always loved the James Brown drummers. So, Clyde and Jabbo and Clyde Stubblefield. What I loved about him is that he was aware enough of jazz to add upbeats to his playing. So when I learned that, I was like, okay, upbeats is a jazz thing. And then when you add that to the rock thing, it just sounds so much hipper, because it's not plum, plum, plum all the time, which is something you can use, and that sounds good in certain aspects. But when you can add the upbeats, it just brings a whole nother sophistication to what you're playing, so those drummers. I went to see Earth, Wind and Fire when I was younger, and I really loved that music too. I liked the feeling, I liked the messages of the music. I loved Jimi Hendrix Experience, because Mitch Mitchell he was playing rock, but what I love about what he was doing is that he added a jazz perspective to that music, which really I give him a lot of credit because that was 1/3 of the sound or 1/4 of the sound of the Hendrix Experience. 1/4 being the drum sound, 1/4 being the guitar sound, 1/4 being the bass sound, and 1/4 being Jimmy's voice. So that was a big part of that music being what it was and being so different. And Mitch Mitchell was trying to emulate two drummers, Elvin Jones and Tony Williams, to the best of his ability. That's what he was trying to interject. And so that's why that music had that kind of perpetual rolling feeling, because of that. Even when I learned about Led Zeppelin and started listening to Led Zeppelin, even John Bonham, as big and chunky as his sound was, he was listening to jazz drummers, and you can tell. You can hear in one of his solos, he played the beginning of a Max Roach solo. The drum also waltzes. He didn't play the whole solo, but he played the beginning. So I'm saying, okay, this dude's listening to the drummers. I listened to certain things that sounded like he was listening to Tony also. So you get like the best of the best, listen to the best of the best in whatever genre you're talking about. And so that was a cue for me too. And I really enjoyed that whole connection. And that let me know too that it's okay to connect that. Listening to Herbie Hancock let me know that it's okay to connect that because he connected all of that. Listening to Weather Report let me know that it was okay to connect that. Listening to everything that Tony did let me know that it was okay to connect that, from Lifetime, which he invented, to from Miles, I would say, to even before Miles, to all the avant-garde stuff that he did, to Miles, to Lifetime, to all the Believe It stuff and all the stuff that he did after that. It lets me know it's okay to connect all of that. It's okay to connect Brazilian rhythms and Indian rhythms and African rhythms. That's what the beauty of the music becomes, because it's like this whole big world and life perspective, that you can add, and it's all inclusive.
Speaking of, I mean, it would be hard to ignore your husband's contribution to integrating different sounds. When was the first time you saw Santana play live?
First time I actually saw Santana play live was when I played with him. I never saw that band, honestly. I heard them on record, but I never saw that band. He needed a drummer to sub for Dennis Chambers. They had a gig that was not scheduled on the tour, and Dennis had booked something else. And so Carlos called me. They called me to sub and do that gig. And so that was actually the first time that I experienced Carlos live, was when I played with him. And that was pretty incredible because there's just a whole big Rolodex of stuff that happens in this band. So to be a part of it is amazing because I get to express so many different sides of Cindy, which is cool.
Well, I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. I just wanted to have a little glimpse of young Cindy Blackman watching Santana in the 70s or something, but
that didn't happen. I
it
never
was
saw
not to
that,
be.
No, I didn't. My mom was so protective of me, in terms of where she let me go, who she let me play with, because, it's hard being a little girl. And I was a skinny little thing. I weighed like 98 pounds or something like that. It's just like, you're not going out hanging out with these old guys. You're just not doing it, And I was like, but Mom, that's where the music is. I don't care. You're not doing it, So it took a while for me to really be able to go out freely and hear all the music that I wanted to do. And God bless my mom for protecting me like that, because it was a good thing that she did. So I hadn't had the experience of seeing Carlos play live when I was young. That never happened.
What was your practice regimen as a kid?
I practiced every single day that I could for as long as I could. And I was learning the rudiments because I had joined a fife and drum corps. And that was a great thing for my hands, because you had to play traditional grip. You had to play match grip. But traditional grip was my favorite grip. It was the most awkward grip and the harder grip, but my favorite grip. And so you had to play all the rudiments, all the 26 American rudiments plus the Swiss rudiments, and you had to start them out at a dirge, so very slowly, and get to your top speed. And the corps line drum master would come by, and you had your drum here, and he would put his hand at different heights. So if the drum is here, if the skin of the drum is here, if he put his hand here, you had to stay at whatever tempo you were at, but play cleanly and not hit his hand. And then he would raise it, and you had to raise your sticks and stay at the tempo that you were at and not hit his hand again. So it was great for control, learning control and to be able to really master the technique of that grip and the technique of actually playing rudiments, to get the sound, to get the fullness at whatever level you're at. That was kind of my routine. Initially I didn't want to study with a drum teacher because I actually didn't see any drummers in my circle who I wanted to sound like. That's childish of me because you can learn from anybody, which I learned later. I later came to that realization. But initially I was like, oh, I don't want to sound like that person, so I don't want to study from that person. But then I was talking to my mom and I'm like, I really need, to study with somebody. And so she found a drum teacher for me. And I did take some lessons from him and learn quite a bit, because he taught me about touch and he taught me, different rudiments and, different things. And later on, I had a second drum teacher, like when I was in high school. So I did have two drum teachers as a child, and they were both very helpful. By the time I got to my second teacher, whose name was Rob the drummer, I already knew like the rudiments and stuff like that. But we started working with odd time signatures and things like that, which was very cool for me to learn. So we started doing that. And I had a little bit of experience with that, just listening to music and mimicking, but to really get into it with him was very cool.
At that point, did you know that Berklee was where you wanted to go, or did you have any other thoughts of what you might want to do? Or you pretty much felt the calling, I feel like, at age 7 that you were going to be a drummer for life. But was there a fallback plan of any sort?
Never a fallback plan. There were a couple of things that I was looking at, like to be a lawyer because I wanted to help injustices, a brain surgeon because it was very intricate and I was very interested in that. But when I checked into both of those fields, I realized that it would take so much schooling that it would take away time from drumming and I'd never be able to play. So I just squashed all of that and, just forged ahead with my main love, which is drumming. And, in terms of Berklee, I looked at some other schools and I looked at North Texas State. I looked at a few others. I looked at New England Conservatory. But I chose Berklee because I felt that Berklee was the school that would allow me the flexibility to really expand on the drums and expand in playing jazz and give me some freedom, to work with those things. I liked the ear training programs that I saw listed. I liked the harmony and theory programs. So for me, Berklee was the better experience. And so that's what I chose. And fortunately, I was accepted.
And so you did 3 semesters, and then, I mean, it happens a lot, and you can always come back. You can always come back. But after the 3 semesters, you got the calling from the Drifters.
Yeah, I actually kind of forgot about that. There was a bass player who was playing with the Roots. I forget his name, but he was from Philly, and he knew that the Drifters were looking for a drummer. They had a 6-month stint in St. Thomas, and 3 months into it, they wanted to change drummers. And so he called and he was like, "Hey, these people are looking, they want a drummer." I'm like, "Well, I don't know about playing with the Drifters, but I need a gig right now. I could use some money." Okay. And I thought St. Thomas, it would be great to go there. So I did. I went and I stayed there for 3 months with them. I didn't want to continue because it was not my thing at all. At the end of that stint, I gave them my notice and they said, "Well, we're working our way back to Philly. Would you, stay on the gig until we get to Philly and then we'll audition drummers there?" Because that was their home base. And I said, "Yeah." And they were very gracious to me. And that was my kind of thing with the Drifters. It was, interesting playing those songs, but that wasn't, what I wanted to do really. But it was cool for the time and it was great. And I appreciate it because it gave me some stability, it gave me a gig, gave me a chance to spend time in the islands. And I love St. Thomas, it's beautiful. And it gave me some independence because I was working and was able to, get some little cash. So it was good experience all over.
At that point, they were playing just kind of the oldies stuff, right? Rather than trying to forge ahead with anything.
Correct.
Was that like the mid 80s or early 80s?
That was 79.
That's even before oldies was a thing.
Yeah. I did my first 3 semesters in Berklee, and it was right after that first semester of 79 that I went with them.
And Benny King was not in the group, obviously, at that point.
No. But they were doing like all those oldies, sweets for my sweets, sugar for my honey. I'll never,
That's great. After that gig ended, you get back to Philly. You drifted with the Drifters back to Philly. And then what's next?
I really wanted to pursue my passion of going to New York. Though I felt that I wasn't ready to go to New York, I was trying to ready myself to go to New York. And my hanging buddy became Wallace Roney. Rest in peace, Wallace. Such a great musician, great trumpet player. And he was like, "Cindy, you're ready." He said, "There's like all levels of musicians in New York, anybody from amateurs and novices to innovators. So whenever you go, at whatever level you're at, you're going to excel and you're going to get better, so you need to go. You need to go now." And I was like, okay. So I went and, I'm so glad that he pushed me to go at the time because, Miles Davis was alive and well and walking around and playing, and you could see him on the street. Max Roach, alive and well and walking around. I saw Max on the street, and Elvin, and Art Blakey, who became my dad, Dizzy Gillespie, all these great innovators, Sonny, who's still with us, Sonny Rollins, Sam Jones, great bass player, all these cats, McCoy Tyner and Walter Davis Jr., of course, the Ron Carters and the Herbies and the Tonys and, Wayne Shorter and Roy Haynes in Philly. I don't know if I mentioned Philly, but Philly Joe, all these cats were, and even Papa Joe was there. Kenny Clark, I met Kenny Clark. He saw me sit in at Sweet Basil's, So all these great cats were there, and I could talk to them. Billy Higgins and Ed Blackwell, and of course, some of the great ones that we still have left, like Al Foster and Billy Hartt and people, we became friends, and I was able to ask them drumming and musical questions and to watch all these people and to see how they navigated and to hear their stories. And so I'm really grateful that I went when I did, because I got to see all that. I was walking on earth at the same time and in the same footsteps as those innovators who created the music. And what better experience is there than that? None.
Do you remember any specific advice that anybody gave you? You said you could get advice from them and talk to them.
One of the great friends of mine at that time was Al Foster. And I don't know whether it was advice, but it was in a sense, because we talked about it all the time, and we talked a lot. We talked for hours on the phone. We talked about three people: Sonny Rollins, Miles Davis, and our hero, Tony Williams. And so when we talked about Art Blakey, and we talked about the big ride cymbal beat, playing a big beat, and with the separation of the big ride cymbal beat, that always stuck into my brain about one of the conversations that Al Foster and I had about that big ride cymbal beat. Billy Hartt, we talked about satisfying the band that you're playing with and giving the band what it needs. I talked a lot to Jimmy Cobb, who was, really instrumental and helpful with me because he befriended me so well. Art Blakey gave me a lot of advice. He was like, as I said, he was like my dad. I used to babysit for his kids, so I was at his house every day. And he taught me how to play on a pillow. He taught me about shading on the ride cymbal, about playing dynamics, about playing a shuffle and not budging from the groove. In fact, one time he was playing at the Village Gate, and I'll never forget, Walter Davis Jr. was playing piano, and I was just there watching. I was on the side of the stage, and he, shrugged his head like, "Come here." And so I went over to the drums because he told me to come. Art Blakey tells you to come, you come, And he said, "Sit down and play and don't budge." And he was playing a shuffle, So I sat down and I mimicked his shuffle. I played the Art Blakey shuffle, and I did not budge. He was gone for probably about 10 minutes. And then I don't know where he went, but he came back and he went, "Yeah." He's winked at me, and then he picked up sticks and he played. And I'm like, okay. And another time with Art Blakey, he was at McKell's playing with his group, and I was feeling really stuck with my comping. And so I went downstairs on his break, and I said, "Art, I'm feeling really stuck with my comping. I just feel like I've hit a wall." And he said, "Cindy, go upstairs." And he said, "Sit down by the drums and you wait for me." So I went and I got the closest seat to the drums. And that stage, if you know McKell's, was so teeny. And I got the closest seat right across from the drums. And I just sat there. And so when he came up and played, he looked at me and smiled. He saw me sitting kind of where he would want me to sit, because I could see him really, really well. And he started playing. And every time there was something that he played that he wanted me to take note of, he'd look at me and wink, And so that was my lesson for that day, And I was like, oh, man, that did it. That just propelled me into it. And I said, okay, I'm feeling looser now. I'm feeling freer. I got more ideas. It was amazing. So there was a lot of that kind of stuff that happened.
So you're in New York for all these years, and you start playing, sitting in on sessions, and you're also playing on records, and some of your compositions are being recorded. And well, first of all, do you have any idea off the top of your head how many recordings you've played on?
Oh, I've never counted, actually. I don't know.
So, but anyway, talk to me a little bit about that period of time when you do start from moving from sitting in on sessions to sitting in and recording sessions.
There was a guy, and I don't know his name, but he was a jazz fan who was always at the gigs. He wore a hat and these boots, and he just loved the music. I don't remember his name. I don't know if I ever knew his name, but I know that one time he came over to me after I sat in with Art Blakey, and he said, "Cindy, I love your energy." He said, "Most drummers don't record with that kind of energy. I hope you do. I hope you," and that never left my mind. Like, because it's easy to just cool it in the recording session. And a lot of times you do, because that's what you should do. But I never forgot what he said about that energy. So I've always tried to keep like a real fresh energy, whenever I do record in whatever I'm playing. And that had a lot to do with it, hearing him say that to me, because he's a listener. I don't think he played, but coming from the listening perspective, it's interesting to hear how somebody on that side of things perceives what we are doing, and perceives what he's hearing. So that was a very interesting thing to me. My first time playing with Ron Carter was frightening. I just tried to be as good as I could be, because Ron Carter is so perfect and he walks with such great everything. I mean, as he was walking, I was visualizing what I was hearing, and his time was so perfect that it looked to me like each beat was like a round pole that had a certain length, and it was a certain fullness that he had as well, and it was all even. So each note had a certain fullness and a certain length that was the same as the next quarter note, and the space in between was the exact same. And I was like, wow, this is crazy good. It was freaking me out how incredible it was, because hearing Ron is amazing in itself, but then to actually play with him and to feel that, it just tripped me out. So that was that was pretty amazing. And he, we were playing, and everybody on the session, on that particular session, we were all young. This is like one of Wallace's records, and we were all young cats, and Ron was the elder statesman. And on the break, when you have your lunch, he was just talking to us, and he was like, every situation is different. So every situation requires something different to make it happen. And that's not verbatim, but that's basically, I don't remember what he said verbatim, but that's basically what he was saying. And that always stuck in my mind as well. That was a great thing for me to hear from such an innovator and such a great musician. And so I always thought of that, this situation is different, so it might require something different than that situation. So what do I need to do to make this situation happen, and what do I need to do to make that situation happen? And there's a lot that goes into that. It's not just what you do from what you play, but it's also the where you play it, the when you play it, and the why you play it.
That's great. So you're doing all this recording, and it's very much the jazz stuff you're recording, and then when the call came for you to audition for Lenny Kravitz, was that way out of the blue? Like, were you even playing rock at the time?
I was not, but I always liked it, and it was always something that, I enjoyed playing. But Wallace's brother, Antoine, was friends with Lenny. And, he said, hey, Cindy, this friend of mine, he's a rock musician. His name is Lenny Kravitz, and he's been looking for a drummer for about a year and a half. He likes Gretsch drums and Kay Zildjian cymbals. And I said, really? Wow. So he's got a good ear. He said, yeah, you want to meet him? And I said, well, a rock and roller with a good ear like that? Yeah. Okay. And I had no idea who he was. I hadn't heard his music. Only thing that I recognized that Antoine told me about him was that he was the ex-husband of Lisa Bonet, who I knew because of the Cosby Show. And I grew up watching that show, like many of us did. But I had no idea what Lenny's music sounded like. And I really had forgotten about the conversation. Some months later, Antoine called me and he says, hey, my friend Lenny called me and he's on the line. Do you want to talk to him? I said, yeah. So he gave Lenny my number, and Lenny called. And he asked me if I could play drums over the phone. And I could, because I had my drums set up in my living room. And at the end of it, he said, hey, I'm in LA. Can you fly out here right now? And I said, okay. And he said, yeah, come out for 2 days. No strings attached. Just come out, play with my band, and I'll send you home in 2 days. So just pack for 2 days only. I said, okay. I packed for 2 days, and I went out there, auditioned with like 40 other drummers. I ended up staying out there for 2 weeks and learning his music and doing a video, Are You Gonna Go My Way, at the end of that 2 weeks, which was a fantastic experience. And after the video was shot, he said, so do you want to join my band? And I said, okay, when do we start? And he started laughing. He said, we started 2 weeks ago. And then he always teased me because he said, You didn't know what you were stepping into, did you? And I said, no. And I like it like that because there was no preconceived anything. When I joined his band, I had no idea who he was. I didn't know what making a video was. I didn't know how big or small he was. I didn't know what kind of venues he played. I didn't know anything. So my, desire to be there was actually very honest. And I'm happy with that and glad that it happened that way rather than, me going in saying, oh, there's this guy, he's a famous. No, it was none of that because I didn't know who he was.
It's such a powerful arrival on the rock scene, though, with the drums in that song and your aesthetic in the video and the whole video. It's just such a great arrival. And well, first of all, I have to ask you, you only packed for a few days. Did you pack those awesome wraparound sunglasses or did you have to buy those or was that wardrobe?
That was a gift from Lenny. I didn't pack those. No, that was part of wardrobe, and I kept those in my wardrobe for a while because they just look kind of cool. But yeah, I didn't pack those. I didn't pack them.
And then, so with the song like that, was that something where he was open to your innovations? Like, I'm guessing those pa 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 pa, that's all you rather than him, right?
Oh no. That was all a part. That was all his part.
Oh, really?
Played
Okay.
his parts. He's very adamant about you playing his parts. So I played his parts on the record. And that he record that record was recorded when I met him, and he really wanted the drummers to and everybody in the band actually. You had to learn. It was a parts gig. You had to learn those parts. So I learned every bar. That's what I did for 2 weeks. I learned all the music.
Yeah.
I learned all the drum parts, all the little skittles and scattles and whatever. And the guitar player Craig, he laughed at me because he said, "Cindy, you even learned the mistakes." I said, well, yeah, that's part of it. So I learned the whole thing. But I had already been transcribing like the greatest music ever because I transcribe Elvin and Tony and Art and Roy and Philly and all the cats. So to transcribe a rock groove to me was not as difficult as that. But yeah, I had to do that because that's what he required. That's what he wanted, and that goes back to satisfying the gig that you're on. And so to satisfy that gig, I had to do that. And so for me, it was not a hardship to do. It was time consuming to do because like I said, I learned every single bar, but I did it because, I wanted the gig to come off the way that the band leader saw it, the way that he wanted it to come off.
That's great. And well, you didn't know it was when you first got there, it was going to be more than 2 weeks, and then it became 10 years, basically, right?
It became 17 years.
17.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Then, I'm guessing with a gig that lasts that long, you do get into a relationship where there is more of your creative input.
There was, when we started getting on the tour and playing, and at first I would just start to do little subtle things. Like before a fill, I would add a rough or a drag or put some flams in there, something that was just for me to say, I put this in there. I would add upbeats in different places, and, we would, and the whole band would start to add, things as we went on in the tours, because we did tours for like a year and a half to 2 years, so you start to add things. And then, if we were adding what he considered to be too much, he would say, okay, let's pull it back and go back to the record for a while. So then we would do that, and then slowly would start to sneak in again. But you do it with taste. So you do it so that it's complementary and so that it doesn't take away. Because I was hearing all these things in my head, all these Tony things that I wanted to play. It fits musically, but that's not what the band leader is looking for. But it fits musically. I could play it and it would sound fantastic, in my ear. But I left those things out, not because I couldn't play them or didn't hear them, but because that wasn't, what that band leader wanted. I did my best to drive that thing as best I could within the framework of that gig.
Mm-hmm. Jumping forward a little bit, you met Carlos and auditioned for him, and whoever wrote the bio on your website said the chemistry was there on stage and off.
It was, yeah, it was. Well, we, playing. I remember and I first played with him as a sub, because he booked a gig that Dennis Chambers couldn't make. And so he called me to sub that gig. And I remember, when I first played, I was like, wow, this is feels really free. I mean, it was, within a certain format, but it felt like there was a nice, beautiful freedom there, and the music kind of floated. And so it was really, really wonderful. We started communicating about the songs and about the music. And, I wanted to know what he wanted, because I wanted to make it happen. And whether I was playing one gig or 100 gigs, and I only expected to do one gig, just the sub, but I wanted to make that one gig as great as I could make it. So we were communicating about that, but then we started communicating about spiritual things and philosophies. And then like a relationship just grew really quickly from there, and I had actually stopped dating people because I didn't have at that point in my life, and I had had a spiritual relationship at one time before, but at this point I didn't have one, and I missed that. And so since I didn't have it, I stopped dating because I was studying Kabbalah, and my teacher said, Cindy, if you're not with somebody who's advancing you spiritually and who you're advancing spiritually, you're wasting your time, And so I was like, you know what, you're right. And I just stopped dating, And so when Carlos came along, I loved where he was at in terms of the spiritual path that he was on. And that was really key for me in terms of us flowering a relationship, because I really missed not having that in my life. And I loved where he was at. Initially, I didn't play with his band. He said, well, I was thinking about hiring you, but guys in my circle were saying, don't mix your relationship with your band thing. It's not going to work. You shouldn't do that. You're going to have conflicts. And he said, I listened. He says, but then I was thinking, well, I want that thing that Cindy's doing, which was a compliment to me. I was like, really? Okay, thank you. And then he asked me if I felt that it could work. And I said, yeah, heck yeah, we're mature. And, neither one of us are petty. So, it's music first, and it's going to work, I believe, if we do it. And so we did. It's working, because we allow ourselves the respect. I respect the bandstand. Who's ever bandstand I'm on, I respect that as sacred. If it's my bandstand or if it's his bandstand or Lenny's bandstand or Jackie McLean's bandstand, Don Pullen's bandstand, whoever, I respect that bandstand, because to me, playing is like praying, so that's a sacred space, the bandstand. So we respect that area and we give to the music first, and only. I don't bring my personal stuff onto the bandstand, and off stage, we respect our personal space, because you need your own space. You need your own time for meditation, reading, just quiet time, studying, listening, because we both do all of that. And then you need your together time. So I respect our together time so that, because if you have too much space in a relationship, that's not good. But if you have too much togetherness, that might not be so good either, because then you're never getting to your own space, so we give each other that. And that works for me. And it works for him, and that's key.
That's beautiful. It really sounds like, I mean, of all the ways you can connect with somebody, you two have connected, emotionally, physically, spiritually, musically. That's something special.
Yeah.
Um, I remember hearing an interview with the two of you, and you'd mentioned just something in passing that you have visitations sometimes from people from beyond the grave in your dreams. Tell me a little bit about that.
Oh my goodness, I've had them for quite a while. Carlos has them too. I remember one time when I was, and this is a rewind back to when I first moved to New York. So this was around 1982, and I was trying to, in my conscious life, my awakened state, I was trying to learn this particular thing that Tony does, and Tony Williams plays, and I wasn't quite figuring it out. And I was thinking, I gotta learn this. And I was trying and trying. I went to sleep one night, and Tony came to me in my dream and showed me how to do it. And I remembered I know how to do it from then on.
Wow.
I've had visitations from Art Blakey. I've had them many from Tony. I've had them from Miles Davis, from different people. I've had them from family members. And Carlos has had them from Miles. He's had them, from many different people as well. There's a connection with those that you revere and love, energy does not die. It only changes, it transforms into something else. So the Tony Williams energy, the Art Blakey energy, the Miles Davis energy, it hasn't dissipated or died. It's just changed. And they're in another dimension, but in an enlightened state, which oftentimes we are in when we're sleeping, because when we're sleeping, we don't have any of the trappings of our physical society. We don't feel the limitations because, we're not limited by that. So many times we are able to transpose ourselves not only to another dimension, but also open to another dimension in terms of connection, and so that has happened for me a lot in dream state. And it's also happened a lot in awakened state when I'm meditating, or just when I'm being quiet, or when I'm in a state of opened bliss and I'm not blinded by the veils of our society, the things that are here to distract us and to block our vision. I don't watch much TV. I watch it once in a while, but television, tell lies to your vision is a big blocker. There are many other things that are blockers too, things that happen in society that are just stupid that we pay attention to. I mean, it's a distraction, and I really try to not be distracted by those things. Not that I don't ever pay attention or listen, or because sometimes I do, but then I have to say, well, hey, whoa, wait a minute, put the brakes on that, because that is just a distraction, and it's distracting me from what's really important in this realm, and what's really important in the whole sphere of the cosmic realm, what I can be in touch with, what I can learn from, what I can hear, what I can feel. And when I do that, I'm the better for it, because I get messages that are oftentimes enlightening. And so I have to catch myself to make sure that I'm staying in the right frame of mind and in the right focus, and keeping my concentration in the right place.
Yeah, it sounds like, I'm guessing, the way you're speaking about it, it sounds like, when the cosmic nature of it all, that music is also a huge part of that.
Music is totally key, because to me, as I was saying before, music is like prayer, and so I'm connected most highly when I'm playing music, and I've had connections with people who have transitioned to the other side when I'm playing music as well. So to me, that's the most intense and the most connected way that I can communicate with other realms, that I can communicate with spirit, is when I'm playing. That's when I'm probably my most honest. That's when I'm my most joyous, when I'm my most sad, when I'm my most happy, when I'm my most everything, because all of my emotions are funneled into every note and every space that I'm playing. And when you're honestly playing music, and when you're doing it from your heart, to me, that's what happens. All of your emotions go into what you're doing and into what you're playing. And that's when the real us comes out.
Wow. Cindy Blackman Santana. What wise words. I mean, is there anything more honest than putting your emotions into your music? Not really. I'm at a loss for a segue, to tell you the truth. This is where I segue into the how you can save $100 off your first Berklee online course. So I'll just say, hey, you listen to this podcast so you can get $100 off of your first Berklee online course. There it is. All you got to do, visit musicismylifepod.com and you will find all of the details you need to make it happen. This episode was edited by Talia Smith, mastered by Jose David Vindis-Mora. All visual assets coordinated by Mike DeBenedictis. Social media by Brooke Larson. Web assistance courtesy of Mark Thomas, Steve Zimmerman, and Joe McDonough. Thanks to our video team who posts these episodes on YouTube 2 weeks after they premiere on podcast services. I wrote and recorded the Music Is My Life theme song, but the expert remixing comes courtesy of Lily Dickinson. Special thanks to Gabriel Reifer Cohen, Greg Fauscher, Carlos Santana, Adam Fells, Aaron Cook, Michael Jensen, Marianne Billum, Jimmy Brook, Jeremy Brisky, and you for listening. Please leave a review on iTunes or leave us 5 stars on the Spotify app so that more awesome listeners like you can find us. Also, I'm really excited to tell you again about the new video series 4-4 that I am hosting. It's 4 serious questions and 4 not so serious questions for our interview guests. It's like Music Is My Life, but a lot faster and weirder. The premiere, of course, 4-4 on April 4th. So go to the Berklee Online YouTube channel and subscribe. So I will see you there.